Normally when players fully go and gain the Twitter fingers, that something's gone wrong. Something may have gone wrong if they have now equipped the Twitter fingers. But Sophie Cunningham now has Twitter fingers.
The WNBA has seen its fair share of rivalries, controversies, and headline-grabbing moments. But what happened with Sophie Cunningham recently hit a different nerve. Known for her fiery style of play and no-nonsense attitude, Sophie became the target of harsh online criticism after suffering an injury. Instead of sympathy, parts of social media turned her pain into a punchline. Fans joked, critics mocked, and trolls flooded her mentions with taunts.
Sophie Cunningham has tweeted, or Sophie Cunningham's sister tweeted out, maybe you should focus less on finding players for commenting on poor officiating, yada yada. And then somebody responded with protect athletes. Shut up B-word at her sister. When Sophie Cunningham took out JC Sheldon. Reality is, the referees dealt with it.
But Sophie Cunningham isn't the type to stay quiet when disrespected. True to her reputation, she clapped back in a way that left no doubt she's not here to be anyone's punching bag. This wasn't just an athlete responding to hate. It was a player standing up against the growing culture of mocking injuries. For entertainment, and what Sophie revealed in her response showed the league and the fans exactly why she commands attention every time her name is mentioned.
And Sophie Cunningham, some of us are raised by the words of don't bite off more than you can chew, and some of us didn't.
The incident began in a way that's become all too familiar in today's sports world. A player gets hurt, emotions run high, and instead of respect, social media erupts with jokes and ridicule.
It's all fun and games until Sophie took judo when she was 6. Like, at the end of the day, I don't think there's anything that wrong with these scenarios. I think the referee called it. I think the referee called it correctly. I think it was a flagrant.
When Sophie Cunningham went down with her injury, many expected the usual chorus of get well soon messages, or at least some understanding of the risks athletes face every single game. Instead, what poured into her feeds was a stream of mockery. Fans clipped the fall, slowed it down, and turned it into a meme. Others dug into her reputation as the WNBA's villain, claiming she finally got what was coming to her. It wasn't. Just a few random accounts, either threads grew long, comments piled up, and her injury became the latest trending punchline. For Sophie, this wasn't surprising, but it was infuriating. She has always been a polarizing figure, one of those players who people either love or love to hate. On the court, she plays with an edge that often draws whistles and technical fouls. Off the court, she carries herself with confidence that critics label arrogance. So when she got hurt, the reaction from some fans wasn't compassionate, was celebration. They laughed at her pain, they mocked her toughness, and they treated the injury as karma rather than bad luck. And that's what flipped the switch for Sophie. Because here's the thing, Cunningham has built her career on never backing down. She's taken hard fouls, stood toe-to-toe with bigger stars, and embraced being painted as the antagonist. But this was different. Injuries aren't just about missing games. They threaten contracts, careers, and sometimes the ability to even keep playing the sport you love. To have that turned into entertainment crossed a line, and Sophie knew it. She didn't just scroll past the comments or stay silent, like many athletes are advised to do. Instead, she decided to confront it head-on. Her first response came on Twitter, where she's usually selective with her interactions. Sophie doesn't often reply to trolls or clap back at random critics, but this time, she made it clear she wasn't going to let the mockery slide.
Like, Sophie Cunningham's not responding to that many people on Twitter. She doesn't respond to that many quote tweets on Twitter. Like, it's very rare, even when she does retweet a lot. And it's clear that she is an avid Twitter user. But like, you're looking at this, very, very rarely claps back and immediately claps back.
Without naming names, she called out the culture of fans who take pleasure in athletes' pain. Her message was short, sharp, and unmistakable. Injuries are not a joke, and if you think they are, you're showing more about yourself than about her. That one post set the tone. Supporters quickly rallied, reminding everyone of Sophie's toughness and contributions on the court. But the critics didn't back down either, doubling down on the karma narrative. What Sophie had stumbled into was more than just personal criticism. It was a debate about how we treat athletes when they're at their lowest. And as her words spread, it was clear this wasn't just a heated moment. This was the start of a larger conversation about respect, hate culture, and the fine line between rivalry and cruelty. To understand why the mockery cut so deep, you first have to understand who Sophie Cunningham is within the WNBA landscape. She isn't the league's top scorer, she isn't always the headline star, but she has carved out something arguably just as valuable. She's unforgettable. Every league has its villains, those players who stir emotions just by stepping onto the court. Sophie has embraced that role fully, and it's made her one of the most recognizable names in the game. Even if her stats don't always scream superstar, from her college days at Missouri to her rise with the Phoenix Mercury and now in the WNBA spotlight, Cunningham has carried herself with a swagger that fans either admire or despise. She plays with a sharp edge, trash talks opponents, and isn't afraid to get physical. That style has earned her comparisons to Dennis Rodman's, someone who thrived not by being the most talented scorer, but by controlling the narrative and forcing the spotlight onto themselves. The difference, though, is that Rodman operated in an NBA era that fed off larger-than-life personalities. Sophie is navigating a WNBA that's still balancing the line between professionalism and entertainment, and that makes her presence both controversial and essential. Critics argue that Sophie is more interested in her brand than the game itself. They point to her social media presence, her willingness to engage in spats online, and her off-court activities as proof she's building a personality rather than focusing solely on basketball. Supporters push back, reminding everyone that she's consistently one of the league's most efficient shooters, ranking near the top in true shooting percentage and delivering when her team needs her. The truth is, both sides are right. Cunningham is doing both hooping at a high level and building a brand that keeps her relevant, whether she's scoring 20 points or sitting out with an injury. This is precisely why the mockery stung so much. For someone like Sophie, who has worked tirelessly to establish herself as more than just another name on a roster, an injury threatens not just her season, but the image she's carefully constructed. When fans celebrated her setback, it wasn't just her knee or ankle being targeted, it was her identity as a competitor. The laughter wasn't about a bad fall. It was a statement that her entire persona was being dismissed as a joke. But here's where Sophie separates herself from the rest. Instead of shrinking from the hate, she leaned into it. She reminded everyone that being polarizing isn't a weakness, it's her weapon. Fans might mock her, critics might call her overrated, but they're all still talking about her. And in a league where attention often dictates opportunity, Sophie knows that every mention, good or bad, keeps her brand alive. Yet beneath the bravado, there's an unspoken question. How long can someone carry that role before it becomes too heavy? And that's where Sophie's response takes an even more fascinating turn, because she didn't just defend herself, she exposed the toxic culture that fuels these reactions. When the first wave of mockery hit, many expected Sophie Cunningham to keep quiet, let the storm pass, and focus on recovery. After all, that's the playbook most athletes follow: ignore the noise, let the PR team handle the rest, and hope people move on to the next controversy. But Sophie has never been one to stick to the script. Instead, she did what very few athletes in her position would dare. She fired back. Her initial clapback came through Twitter, and it wasn't subtle. Sophie doesn't usually respond directly to trolls, but this time she cut through the noise. With a sharp, pointed message, she told critics to stop pretending injuries were comedy, reminding them that athletes put their bodies on the line every night. She wasn't asking for pity. She was demanding basic respect, and her tone made it clear she wasn't going to be a silent target. That one tweet sparked a ripple effect across social media. Supporters flooded her mentions with encouragement, praising her toughness and standing up for her in the replies. They reminded the critics that Sophie has built a career, not just on her skill set, but on her resilience. For fans who have followed her journey, this was classic Cunningham: unapologetic, unfiltered, and unwilling to bow to outside pressure. But the backlash was just as strong. Detractors doubled down, framing her response as proof she couldn't handle the heat. Some mocked her further, spinning her clapback into new memes and adding fuel to the fire. Others dismissed her entirely, saying her outburst showed insecurity rather than strength. And because Twitter thrives on polarization, the conversation quickly escalated into a full-blown debate about who Sophie really is: a fearless competitor defending her dignity, or a player who thrives on drama and can't let things go. The fallout didn't stop there. Media outlets picked up on the exchanges, turning Sophie's tweets into headlines. Sports talk shows debated whether her reaction was justified or overblown. Even fellow athletes began weighing in, some siding with her stance against mockery, while others implied that engaging with trolls only made things worse. Suddenly, a personal moment of frustration had transformed into a league-wide talking point. What made this clash so fascinating is that it revealed both sides of Sophie Cunningham's public persona. On one hand, she's the gritty fighter who refuses to let disrespect slide, embodying the energy that draws fans to her in the first place. On the other hand, she's the lightning rod whose every word becomes fuel for controversy. And whether you see that as strength or weakness depends entirely on which side of the Sophie debate you fall on. Still, one fact became undeniable. Sophie had turned a moment of vulnerability into yet another chapter of her brand. Her injury may have sidelined her physically, but online, she was dominating the conversation. And with the spotlight brighter than ever, the next question was obvious: how? Would the league, and especially the referees, respond to a storm they could no longer ignore? If Sophie Cunningham's injury and fiery clapbacks exposed the toxic side of fan culture, the aftermath pushed the spotlight onto another long-standing problem in the WNBA: officiating. Players, coaches, and fans have been complaining for years about the inconsistencies of referees, but Sophie's situation turned that frustration into a firestorm. For many, the mockery she endured was only part of the issue. The bigger story was how referees handled her and others like her compared to notorious repeat offenders. Consider Bria Hartley, for example. She's been caught on tape yanking Angel Reese down by her hair, undercutting players midair, and delivering plays many would call flat-out dirty. Yet time and time again, Hartley has walked away with little more than a slap on the wrist. Meanwhile, when Sophie Cunningham commits a hard foul, referees seem quick to pull the trigger on technicals and flagrant calls. Fans can't help but notice the double standard. And Sophie's injury only poured gasoline on the debate. The incident reignited discussions around favoritism and selective punishment. Why does one player get ejected instantly for aggressive contact, while another is allowed to rack up an entire highlight reel of questionable plays with minimal consequences? The inconsistency isn't just frustrating, it's dangerous. Players feel unprotected, rivalries spiral out of control, and the integrity of the game itself comes into question. Sophie's injury became symbolic of that broader problem. Supporters argued she was being targeted not just by fans, but by referees, who treat her reputation as justification for harsher penalties. Critics pushed back, saying her style of play brings that attention on herself. But whichever side you believe, the truth remains: inconsistent officiating makes it impossible to separate perception from reality. The referee's role is supposed to be simple: apply the rules evenly, keep games safe, and prevent situations from escalating. Yet too often in the WNBA, whistles come down to reputation, momentum, or even crowd influence. That unpredictability erodes trust, and when trust in officiating breaks, every foul becomes a conspiracy. Every ejection a headline, and every injury a flashpoint. Sophie's case embodied that perfectly. Even casual fans noticed the contradictions. Online threads filled with side-by-side clips, Sophie being ejected for a flagrant 2, while another player escaped with a common foul for a similar or worse act. The message was clear: the referees weren't just calling the game, they were shaping the narratives. And when narratives get shaped unevenly, players like Sophie end up carrying scars that go beyond the physical. What made this moment especially tense is that it wasn't just Sophie who was frustrated. Other players, from rookies to veterans, quietly echoed the same complaints. Some even suggested that the league was turning a blind eye to protect certain marketable stars, while allowing role players to take the brunt of discipline. Whether true or not, that perception is toxic, and Sophie's injury became the latest exhibit in a case that fans and athletes alike can no longer ignore: The question now wasn't just about Sophie Cunningham's reputation or her injury, it was whether the league could survive the growing perception that referees were fueling the chaos instead of controlling it. And just when things couldn't get more chaotic, the WNBA's drama machine cranked into overdrive. Every league needs storylines. In the NBA, it's superstar rivalries, blockbuster trades, and larger-than-life personalities. In the WNBA, where the league is still fighting for mainstream recognition, drama often carries as much weight as stats. On the scoreboard, Sophie Cunningham's situation proved this in real time. Her injury and the backlash weren't just another incident, they became fuel for the WNBA's ongoing drama machine. The constant churn of conflict that keeps fans clicking, debating, and tuning in. For years, the WNBA has battled the challenge of visibility. Highlight reels and box scores only go so far when casual fans don't yet know every name or storyline. What cuts through the noise is controversy. Fans gravitate toward personalities, whether it's Caitlin Clark's meteoric rise, Angel Reese's unapologetic confidence, or Sophie Cunningham's fiery on-court persona. The league has realized that these flashpoints, while messy, are also magnetic. Sophie doesn't have to be the best player in the league to be one of the most talked about. And that's exactly what makes her valuable to the WNBA's narrative ecosystem. Cunningham's polarizing image feeds this system perfectly. She's not a generational scorer or MVP frontrunner, but she has mastered the art of commanding attention. Whether she's clapping back at critics, getting whistled for hard fouls, or sinking clutch threes, she's in the conversation, and conversations equal relevance. In a league where social media traction often translates to TV ratings and ticket sales, Sophie has become one of the most bankable figures if some fans only tune in to root against her. The league's marketing machine thrives on this duality. Every hero needs a villain, and every golden star needs a rival. Sophie Cunningham plays that part seamlessly. She's the player who opponents glare at, the one fans love to boo, and the one reporters know will give them a headline-worthy quote. In short, she generates drama without even trying. And when drama drives engagement, the WNBA benefits. But the downside is clear. Drama can quickly spiral into chaos. Fans mocking injuries, referees under scrutiny, and social media wars distract from the actual games being played. Instead of focusing on Sophie's shooting efficiency or her impact as a role player, the narrative becomes about controversy. Some argue that this cheapens the league's image, painting it as more of a spectacle than a sport. Others counter that without these storylines, the WNBA risks fading into the background of the sports world. What's undeniable is that Sophie Cunningham sits at the heart of this tension. She embodies both the risk and the reward of the WNBA drama-driven growth. Her name sparks emotion, her presence guarantees conversation, and her reactions ignite debate. Whether you love her or hate her, you're paying attention, and in a league fighting for every ounce of relevance, that's priceless. Yet, as the Hartley incident and her injury backlash showed, there's a fine line between compelling drama and destructive chaos. And the moment Bria Hartley reacted to her suspension with her own tantrum, the machine shifted gears once again, proving the league's appetite for conflict is far from satisfied. When Bria Hartley was handed her suspension, the expectation was simple: serve the punishment quietly, move on, and let the story fade. Instead, what followed was nothing short of a meltdown. Rather than accepting accountability, Hartley lashed out through body language, through comments, and through the growing perception that she felt unfairly targeted. This reaction didn't cool the firestorm. It poured gasoline on it. Hartley has always carried a reputation for physical play, sometimes crossing the line into reckless. Clips of her yanking Angel Reese to the floor by her hair and undercutting opponents mid-air have circulated widely online, creating a highlight reel of infractions that critics use as evidence against her. So when the suspension came, many believed it was overdue. To them, the league was finally holding her responsible. But for Hartley, this wasn't discipline, it was humiliation. Her frustration bubbled over in subtle ways. First, she threw shade online, hinting that the league was playing favorites, punishing her while letting others skate by. Friends and fans close to her echoed the sentiment, saying she was being scapegoated while players like Sophie Cunningham got away with similar antics. The irony, of course, was that Sophie had just faced her own share of backlash and had been ejected for her part in the confrontation. But perception is everything, and in Hartley's eyes, she was the one being singled out. Then came the tantrum. Itself, during practices and media appearances, Hartley's body language told the story, shaking her head, rolling her eyes, and muttering under her breath when the topic came up. She made it clear she wasn't moving past the incident, that defiance, instead of earning her sympathy, painted her as unprofessional in the eyes of many. Fans who might have been willing to defend her grew weary of the excuses, labeling her reaction as immaturity rather than passion. Still, not everyone saw it that way. Some fans rallied to her side, praising her for showing raw emotion and refusing to be silenced. In their eyes, Hartley was exposing the league's hypocrisy, pointing out that discipline often feels more about optics than fairness. They argued that she brought an intensity the WNBA desperately needed, and that trying to dull her edge would only hurt the product. The debate split the community in two. On one side, people saw Hartley as reckless, dangerous, and unwilling to take responsibility. On the other, they saw her as a warrior punished for playing with passion in a league that claims to value toughness. And caught in the middle of all this was Sophie Cunningham, whose name kept resurfacing in the narrative, whether she liked it or not. Hartley's meltdown ultimately did more than damage her image. It exposed the fragile balance the WNBA is walking between encouraging fiery competition and controlling chaos. Instead of quelling the drama, her tantrum magnified it, making clear that the real issue wasn't just two players clashing. It was a league struggling to manage its identity in the spotlight. Bria Hartley's meltdown and Sophie Cunningham's injury backlash were not isolated moments. They became symbols of something much larger. The WNBA has always balanced a unique challenge, growing its visibility while maintaining professionalism. On one hand, the league needs storylines that grab headlines, stir emotions, and bring new fans through the door. On the other, every controversy risks painting the league as chaotic, unfair, or even hostile. Hartley's tantrum and Sophie's polarizing role pulled that tension into full view. For fans watching from the outside, the optics were messy. One player injured and mocked online, another suspended and refusing to accept it. Referees accused of favoritism, and social media turning every moment into a trending debate. Instead of conversations about playoff races, scoring leaders, or breakout rookies, the spotlight was locked on disputes and dysfunction. For a league fighting for mainstream respect, this wasn't the image they wanted, dominating headlines. But here's where the crisis cuts deeper. It isn't just about perception, it's about trust. When players and fans believe referees call games unevenly, every foul becomes a flashpoint. When suspensions feel selective, every punishment is questioned. And when social media mocks injuries instead of rallying behind players, it chips away at the sense of community the league is trying to build. The result is an environment where chaos overshadows competition. Sophie Cunningham embodies this paradox perfectly. She's one of the most recognizable names in the league, despite not being a top-tier scorer. Her presence keeps fans engaged, whether they love her or hate her. But the same fiery personality that fuels her brand also feeds into the WNBA's image problem. When she claps back at critics, it's entertaining, but it also sparks debates about professionalism. When she's ejected for a flagrant foul, fans call out double standards. Every move she makes becomes part of the larger narrative about whether the league is embracing drama or struggling to control it. Bria Hartley's reaction only amplified the issue. Her refusal to accept suspension quietly turned what could have been a footnote into a headline. And while some admired her defiance, many saw it as evidence of immaturity and instability within the league. The question shifted from, was the foul fair, to, can the WNBA handle its own stars? This is the heart of the image crisis. The league wants fiery personalities, but fiery personalities bring controversy. It wants viral moments, but viral moments often come from conflict. It wants players who are household names, but those names sometimes carry baggage. The balance is fragile, and right now, it's tipping more toward chaos than control. The truth is, the WNBA's growth depends on its ability to manage this tension. Stars like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese bring mass attention, while figures, like Sophie Cunningham, keep the drama alive. But if the league can't set boundaries and establish consistency, the chaos risks overshadowing the talent. And with Sophie's future uncertain, the question becomes even more pressing: will she be sidelined by injury and controversy? Or will she continue to be the lightning rod that keeps the WNBA in the headlines? Looking ahead, the question hanging over the WNBA isn't just about Sophie Cunningham's recovery from injury. It's about what comes next for one of the league's most polarizing figures. Her reputation has been built on toughness, defiance, and a willingness to embrace the villain role. But her future now carries two possibilities. Either she cements herself as a larger-than-life personality who drives the league forward, or she risks being sidelined permanently, both physically and in narrative relevance. On the court, Sophie's value is undeniable. She has been one of the most efficient shooters in the league, ranking near the top in true shooting percentage and consistently spacing the floor for her teammates. For a player not considered among the WNBA's elite superstars, she has maximized her impact by excelling in her role. Coaches appreciate her reliability, teammates feed off her energy, and opponents are forced to respect her perimeter threat. If healthy, she can continue contributing as a high-level role player on a team that needs her spark. Off the court, though, is where Sophie's presence really towers. She has carved out a personal brand that extends far beyond her box score numbers. By leaning into her brash personality, engaging with fans online, and refusing to shy away from conflict, she has created a space for herself as one of the league's most marketable figures. Brands are noticing, media outlets are covering her every move, and fans, both supportive and critical, can't stop talking about her. In an entertainment-driven sports era, that makes her invaluable. But the risks are clear. If the injury sidelines her for an extended period, momentum can fade quickly. The WNBA moves fast, and new stars like Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and Paige Buchers are capturing mainstream attention. In that environment, Sophie has to remain present, whether through her recovery journey, continued social media engagement, or by finding ways to stay in the conversation. Sitting in silence isn't her style, but she must also navigate carefully. Too much controversy could erode her reputation beyond repair, while too little visibility could push her out of the spotlight altogether. The truth is, Sophie Cunningham's future depends on whether the WNBA decides to embrace her role as a catalyst. Every league needs its lightning rods, and Sophie fits that role perfectly. She's competitive, unapologetic, and always compelling. But for her, the challenge is balance, channeling that fire without letting it consume her career. The injury was a setback, but her clapbacks proved she still has the will to fight. And that's what fans have come to expect from her, if she returns strong. Sophie has the chance to solidify herself not just as a polarizing figure, but as a pioneer for how players can shape their own narratives in the modern WNBA. If she doesn't, her story risks becoming one of wasted potential and controversy. Either way, the league will be watching closely, because Sophie Cunningham's future isn't just about her, it's about how the WNBA chooses to define itself in this era of drama, growth, and identity. Sophie Cunningham's story isn't just about an injury or a few heated tweets, it's about the collision between passion, perception, and the future of the WNBA. Her fiery response to mockery revealed the deeper cracks in a league still figuring out how to balance drama with professionalism. On one side, she's the gritty competitor who refuses to be silenced, a player who brings undeniable energy to every game. On the other, she's a lightning rod for controversy, constantly walking the fine line between hero and villain. Bria Hartley's tantrum, the officiating debates, and the fan reaction all fed into a larger picture of a league that thrives on chaos, even as it struggles to control it. What happens next for Sophie Cunningham will ripple far beyond her own career. Because whether you cheer for her or against her, one truth remains: she makes the WNBA impossible to ignore.